How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. So we're going to continue with our sort of frame textures here, and this looks a little bit different than last time we left off. Obviously, I kind of have this logo up here, and the rulers are filled in. Now this is just the mask work. If we dive back into our Photoshop scene for this, I've just sort of gone ahead and kind of saw where these things were laid out, and I'm just sort of continuing on with the mask. I opted to do this off of camera because it's just tedious. I essentially just brought in a screenshot from one of the references and just traced with like literally the square tool and some text on top of it, and then just saved it over top of our standard mask. So it really isn't anything too complex. So it took a while, probably like an hour, to sort of get everything lined up properly. Same with this. So I just did it off of camera, and it's not done yet, obviously, so we'll be going through and giving it the proper treatment. This guy especially, I don't think we're going to do in this part. I think, let me just find exactly where I put him. I think it's just this one-off fill layer here, if I'm in the right spot. But what I thought we could do in this part is focus on the rulers and kind of everything else that isn't like directly attached to the frame. And we can get those done, and that makes sure that in the next part we can just sort of wrap everything up as we do our more detailed texture pass on everything up top, including this logo and all that, since we already have it kind of in place. I think it would be nice to sort of dedicate a part just to these guys here, these side pieces, this, and really just sort of tweak those guys as best as we can. I've also sort of noticed, like, as we zoom out, it really is coming all together now, and I think adding some better color and stuff up here is going to really help push it quite a bit. I think when we're just looking at the frame on its own, it's pretty easy to sort of look at it and be like, oh, this is kind of subpar, but when all the elements are sort of coming together, it really helps sell the look. So let's just go ahead and get rid of all that so we can just focus in on these specific areas, and we can sort of take a bit of a dive into these top areas here. Let's go ahead and close out of this, and let's start with, I think this metal trim will probably be the easiest. So metal miscellaneous is covering this border on the ruler, this front plate, the back, and these top pieces. And they all seem to be the same material. These two might be a stretch, so we might at least give this guy in the front something a bit different. But either way, they're all going to be somewhat quick. So let's go ahead and jump in here and see if we can start with a smart material of some kind. That'll get us most of the way there. Kind of like the standard that we've been doing with everything else. Antique silver doesn't look too far off, but we might as well browse a little bit more. Concrete, definitely not. Iron, no. I think silver is probably the go-to here. So let's just work our way back up there and put that in our metal mist layer that we've already masked out in the first part. Give it a second to sort of apply to everything. And I think this is probably the best direction to take it. And then the next part will mostly be, even though we're touching the top, the next part can just sort of be like a polish, touch everything up sort of phase. But all these sort of neon colors that are popping out kind of make it hard to really understand the look of everything. Like, even that already is going pretty far in helping it. Yeah, this front plate looks a little ridiculous, as does this. So I think we might go ahead and reserve this layer to the ruler metal, and then we can just sort of use our paint layers to, let's see, grab the UV shells and just sort of cut them out of here. Just make sure we're getting everything. And I'm going to get rid of these guys here too, because I feel like they'll probably need their own treatment. And we can just sort of focus in on these guys one at a time here. So let's take a look at these layers, what they're giving us, just sort of work our way up. I think is kind of the best way to approach it most of the time. So starting at the base, it's just sort of like a matte, a little rough metallic look to it. I kind of like making it a bit warm because for the most part everything we're looking at is very cool tone, so anytime we can offset that, it's probably a good idea to do so. And I'm not going to go overboard with it, but I think it just adds a little bit. This roughness layer seems to be some kind of mask where they're affecting the roughness. We can take a look at exactly what it's doing here by changing to the roughness view, and it seems to be just completely overpowering it. So let's pull the wear levels down on this mask a little bit, turn the contrast up. And it's important for us to have like variety in our roughness, and this is looking pretty uniform, so we can turn it up a little bit more. It seems like the fill layer is doing all the work. Let's see if we can find a happy medium where this wear seems to be targeting the edges, which I'm cool with. I kind of like that. Maybe some grunge would be appropriate though. And then we can put this on top, but quite a bit less, I think. I don't want it to go overboard. Let's see how that looks in the material view. Yeah, we're definitely getting some rougher edges, and I think that's helping sell it a little bit more. So nice. Dirt, what are we working with? Obviously some cavity dirt and some random splotches. So this one is just a generator itself. So let's see if we can, I think the grunge is going to go a long way with this. Caking it on top, I'm really liking that kind of look. I'm going to want to turn the contrast down because this is something that's just going to have like dust sprinkle over it. Kind of giving us this look here, which means I might even want to make it white. Kind of looks like the reference has it going that way, but I think we can just make that a different layer altogether. I think that dirt is more appropriate right now. Scratches are, well, we've gone over this with the other parts. We definitely don't want to overdo it. We don't want them to be too big, so we can turn the tiling up so we're getting, it's kind of nice. Rotate it so it's not too obvious. I just don't want too much in one place. And of course we could like manually paint this out, but if we can get like a happy accident this way, I'll gladly accept that. So it's adding a little bit, I'm cool with that. We got a dust layer, which definitely just seems like some surface dust. Got a fill layer, and then we have our generator, which is doing something. I'm going to turn it down a little bit, and then let's see if we can mess with the roughness, because it's becoming a pretty uniform sort of thing. Maybe we should turn the base roughness down quite a bit, because the original metal wouldn't be rough. It's the things that are caked on top that are adding to it. Let's see if that helps a lot. And we should probably be checking the back as well. Yeah, it's about what you'd expect. It's so thin, right? I'm not too worried about this specific part, so I'm cool with that. One thing I do want to add though is these like white speckles. They seem to be like chipping into the paint. Is this painted? See if we can find another example. Like, to me this just seems like metal, right? The other one seemed painted, but we've been sort of going off of this a little bit more. Let's just go ahead and add those in and see if we can get an effect we like. And I like how that sort of continues along. That's pretty nice. But just looking up here, I think when we do our pass up here, I'm gonna have to return to this for some scratches. It seems like a little bit too much in my opinion. But let's go ahead and add a fill layer. Give it a second to plop in. We can call this white specks. Add a black mask. Add a fill, and then just type in noise, and we're going to do blue noise, which I think we figured out is kind of the better option when it comes to noise. Let's turn the tiling down a little bit so it's more obvious. Turn the balance down so we're getting a few less of them, like this. Actually, let's turn the tiling back up. Something really small like this is probably best. They are very uniform, so I'm going to try and warp them a little bit so we can add a filter to this guy. And scroll down to warp. So it's going to sort of randomize it. We're just going to turn that down. So they're not all just uniform dots anymore. Okay, it's definitely adding something. Let's go ahead and make it more of a dust color by adding a slight warm tone to it. We're going to want it to have a bit of a dip in the height. Just a little bit, nothing too crazy. We're going to want the roughness to go pretty much all the way up. And it's just kind of like a micro detail. I'm going to be pulling back this dust a little bit. I think we went a bit overboard with it. And then I'm curious if the base would be a little bit better actually as a cool tone. If we desaturate it quite a bit. I feel like that might actually be a bit better. Then I'm going to want to turn the brightness down a bit. I feel like it's still saturated even though we have it like way low. But we can offset that by making maybe the dirt a little bit more warmer in color. As well as the dust, we can add some warmer saturation to it. Turn the opacity up. And then I think the one thing we might be missing is maybe some kind of rust. It's hard to say though because the reference here doesn't really have any in here. But what we could do actually is set this up so that we have this background plate and this in the same layer. And then we can sort of add a rust sort of blending the two of them together. So I think that's probably the best way to go about it. So we have this plastic metal misc layer. That's what we're in right now. Ruler metal, that's what we're in. Okay. Let's get rid of this default color right now. And this painted layer is going to be the background of the ruler for both sides. So let's start sort of messing with this. We have this fill here, which is just our number mask. I've already placed it in just like we've done with all the other ones. It's essentially just a fill layer with a black mask with a fill, and then I just put in our mask here. So I'm going to be leaving that. We're going to be tweaking it a little bit so we can get these colors and stuff a little bit more accurate. Like this yellow and this red, I think, add quite a nice pop to everything. So we're going to be still leaving that the way that is. And in order to do so, I guess we're going to have to split it into two layers. One that's the red and one that's more yellow. But let's just go ahead and let this save, and then we'll figure that out. Okay, let's start with the background layer. It seems like this is a chip here, so it seems like it is some kind of painted metal of some kind. So let's see. We have this painted metal that we made, but it's a little bit too, like there's too much going on, I think, for this. I don't think we need to go that far. So what I'm going to do is actually just find that we used a smart material at the start for it. I think we just typed in painted metal actually. I can't remember which one it was. Steel painted worn, I think might have been it. Let's just slap that in and use it as some kind of base foundation for it. I put it underneath the mask as well so that we can sort of contrast it all and see how it looks layered up already, because we're going to be setting it up this way naturally. So yeah, this is just a step in the right direction, but definitely not what we're exactly going for. I'm just going to get rid of this base layer. It's not doing much for us. And let's turn all this off and work our way up like we usually do. And I'm just going to leave this sharpen on for now. So we have this base metal plate. It's a little dark, some scratches in it. The scratches are not really ideal where they are, so I'm just going to rotate it a bit. And all things considered, I kind of like the variation of roughness and kind of the pattern on it, so I'm kind of cool leaving that how it is. Occlusion dirt, this is going to be, this right now is underneath the paint, but we're going to have paint over pretty much everything, so I'm actually going to move this to the top and turn it off for now, because we'll come back to it. We have rust. I do want this to be underneath the paint actually. I want this to be in contact with the metal. So I actually don't mind how this is set up exactly. I'm just going to turn the contrast down quite a bit so we're getting some more warm and cool tones sort of clashing a little bit. But when we turn the paint on, we won't be able to see that anyways. This is just going to be for if we have some chips. I'm going to start by taking this mask and yeah, I pretty much don't want any chipping at the start. I sort of want an unbiased look at this paint. So we have a bunch of different layers here. We have the shiny paint itself, which we're going to be making this this black tone, completely desaturated, and it's pretty dark and pretty matte as well. So I'm actually going to be turning the roughness up for this guy. I guess when you think about how this would practically be used, you want it to be as readable as possible, so they're using a bit of a matter paint, a little bit of a reflection to it, but nothing too crazy. And then it still might be a bit dark, so I'm gonna just bump it up a bit. Worn paint. What is this exactly doing? I think it might be... It's just affecting the roughness. Interesting. Let's take a look at our roughness view and see if we can tell exactly what it's doing. Okay, well, it's kind of just affecting everything. Well, it's kind of going a little crazy with that, kind of considering it's affecting, yeah, the entire surface. So we can probably alter this a little bit. I like the idea of having a layer here that gives us some roughness variation, but I'm just going to make a new one. Just call it roughness variation. We can then turn everything off but roughness, add a black mask, add a fill to it, and just sort of find some sort of grunge that we think would naturally sort of occur in these areas. Let's see. Grunge dirt thin might be a good one. Just some basic variety on the surface here. I don't want the balance to be too crazy, but we could actually affect the roughness a bit more. And we can do better than that, I think. A dust, maybe? Either way, I'm going to turn up the tiling on these. Maybe try 3, so it's just a bit more generous with what we're seeing. I'm not looking for any scratches or anything, just sort of like some caked on some sort of caked on grime that's sort of been there for quite a while. Definitely not that. I feel like I'm overthinking this. It shouldn't be too difficult to find something. I kind of like this concrete one because it's very directional, and we can rotate it 90 degrees. And then if we go back to material, if we turn up the roughness, we're getting some more variety across this. Maybe I'll turn down the tiling actually. But having that kind of variation across the surface is pretty important. So I'll leave that in, and we can work our way up. We have cracks. I'm on the fence about this, unless we can turn this up way high and it looks all right. It's just some surface imperfections. I'm not too happy with it. Maybe if we turn the height information way down to like 0.003. So it's like very, very minuscule. Like I can work with that, but I just think that's a little overkill. It's not totally necessary. Just sort of messing with different tilings on it. It's making a very slight difference, but almost nothing. So I'm just going to keep it super low. And then we come to the paint layer itself, where we can affect the sort of amount that's being stripped off of it. I might want the ambient occlusion to be more of a reason why this is happening. curvature, we can turn that down. We seem to just be getting this one spot here, and it's probably because of the texture opacity, I'm guessing. Yeah, it's texture 2 opacity. So I'm going to turn, yeah, AO all the way up and see if we can get anything out of that. It doesn't really seem like it. Either way, I don't mind that crack there, but we're going to have to add more to it. So I'm going to right click and add a paint layer. And we're going to have to dive into our brushes and see if we can find something that kind of mimics like cracking paint or something. If I type in crack, we have a couple of different crack brushes. We can try out one of these and see how it goes. If we turn our mask down, like it looks kind of cool, but I think it's not really what we're going for. I'm gonna type in damage, nothing, chip, concrete chips, chipper. We can just try one of these and see how it looks, right? Don't really have to commit to anything. I'm just gonna erase that. Yeah, this is definitely more of like a concrete chip. So let's just go back to our mold brush that we know and love. And use this guy to just sort of paint in a little rust in some areas. And then sort of pull it back. Just some stuff in the corner where kind of naturally just you'd sort of find it populating anyways. Around the screws, really get it there in the corners, creeping along the bottom, and then turning the brush back and erasing some of it. But I like to not put it all the way, so we're still getting some subtle variation in there. Just going to add a bit more here to match the damage we already have. Just kind of trace along the bottom here. And I guess in this case, I'd probably want to put this number mask in the paint layer. It's kind of the only way it would make sense, because we'd want this to be chipped out as well, right? If this paint is getting chipped, it would only make sense that it's all getting chipped. So I'm really just sort of going through and overdoing it right now, and then like before, we're gonna go back with a white value and just sort of tone all this in really. But I'm just trying not to be too scared to do some more bold moves like that. And then maybe just like one larger. larger area like that to kind of offset everything. And then, yeah, let's go back, put our brush almost on completely white, and then just sort of tone in a lot of these areas. So we're getting some like AO, like really tight to the edge grunge, but really not damaging things too much. I'll have some areas where I completely erase it, some areas where I leave it a little less touched. And then as for this area, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to blend this yet. Let's just... You might be able to just do something like this. So it looks like one area got really worn out. So we'd really have to scratch out some of these numbers and markings. But then I feel like we'd need something similar on the other end as well. Just because like it makes sense for the effects to be similar on both ends. So I'm actually just going to turn this all the way to black so we can get rid of some of these markings. No, it's definitely not it. I'm just going to undo all that. Like I like the idea of like some areas being really worn out and scratched, but I don't think that's the right way to go about it. I think that looks pretty good though, pretty natural. We can do something similar on this side, maybe just have it hug the bottom though. And then really bring it back in. Okay, let's move our way up to rust stains, because we were still just in the paint mask. We still have more to do here, and we can always come back to it. Rust stains seem to be these really deep rusty parts. None of the references have these, so I don't mind having them as long as we crank it way down. I'm gonna turn the height range down, normal intensity down. Height position, we can get it to chill out a little bit, and then all in all just tone it in. let's change this to our height layer and just lower the opacity on it. I don't like these big chunks, but I'm kind of liking this collecting on the edges here. So height, I'm just going to turn to 0. Give that a second to do its thing. Okay, maybe not 0. Let's just try and do a value of 1. Get some little bits of information in there. And we can go back to our base color. Lower the opacity on it a little bit. But I'm really liking this sort of edge bleeding rust. Turn that down a little bit. Okay, got rust occlusion, which is just going to be pretty much what we just went over, but a little bit more, I'm guessing. Really hugging those edges and those crevices. Let's just give that a second to load in. And wow, okay, that's a bit extreme. If I remember correctly, this is the grunge part is doing this. If we turn the grunge down, it'll get rid of this. Yeah, okay. So this is still giving us like a nice texture over top of everything, but I think it's still a bit much. We can turn that down for sure. It's giving us some nice edge damage and color variety though. So I might turn it up a little bit. And we can affect the color. Might want to make it a bit brighter. Since our background is so dark, we can definitely afford to brighten this up a bit, and then I might lower the saturation on it. Cool. And then all we have left is that occlusion dirt that we stripped from the bottom, and it's definitely overpowering here. So let's just sort of adjust it a bit. Grunge amount, I'm going to want to turn up opacity way down. The color of it itself is a little too dark, which I think is a problem. I'm just adding some nice color in there. We're getting some very uniform stuff on the bottom now. I think it is this rust occlusion. So I'm going to go in here with a paint layer and just sort of break it up a little bit. Just don't want it to be too consistent there. Okay. Losing a lot of information here, but I think this is the paint layer that's doing that. So to compensate for now, I'm just going to tone down the rust. Then we have a sharpen, and that's all we have set up for this layer. Now, we haven't really touched the back on this. You know what, let's actually finish the front and then we'll go to the back. So one of the things we're gonna have to do is set up these different colors first. So we have the numbered mask. I'm going to change this to numbered mask red. And so we'll just start with the red ones, which are everything along the bottom. In order to do so, I'm going to add a paint layer to this fill, and I'm actually just going to paint out everything that's not red. So let's change our brush back to just sort of like a standard something normal, I guess. So I'm just going to close out of this, turn down all the jitters that came default with this brush, and then just type in shape so we can get our standard circle back. It's just going to make it easier to mask this stuff out. And you know, one way we could have done this was we could have actually just exported out of Photoshop 2 different masks for this, but I mean, we already have enough layers as it is. I don't mind sharing one mask on it. So only keeping things that are red, so all the numbers, lines, and text up here, just gonna go ahead and remove. So a little tedious, but in the grand scheme of things, it really isn't that difficult. Just another one of those cases in this tutorial where I really don't have too much to comment on. Whew, okay, so we're back. That was a pretty gnarly crash. You can check the time on the bottom right to see how long I was out for there, but I pretty much had to redo everything there and got us back to where we were. But I've already separated these masks now, so we have a top layer and a bottom layer. And let's go ahead and sort of mimic this setup here. So I think the bottom is the red one, so we can go ahead and give it a red color, darken it a little bit. Kind of want this to look a little faded, so I'm going to go ahead and lower the opacity to like 80%, maybe even a bit less, so you can kind of see the texture going through it a little bit. But let's just sort of mess around with some of the values and find something we like. Kind of like a faded red is kind of nice. We don't need metallic roughness. I guess it would be a bonus to kind of have it be a different value, but I don't want it to be too different. So I'll make it a little bit rougher. And I might just make it a tad brighter. As for this one, seems to be like an off-white yellowy look. Bit darker, faded. Yeah, along these lines here. Maybe even a little less saturated, or more saturated. Or we had it at a pretty good value. Could drop the opacity a bit. The back is affected too. We're gonna have to do a lot of work back here to sort of restore this a bit though. Yeah, it's kind of completely demolished, but we're just focusing on the front for the time being. And yeah, those colors are pretty spot on. What I do want to do though is kind of add some grunge to this, as if they're fading away a bit. So let's add a new group in here. Just call this guy the ruler decals, and plop them in. In this way we can affect both of them at the same time with some sort of mask. So let's just find a smart mask that we kind of like, some kind of surface worn kind of effect, and use it as a template. It's a little bit aggressive, but it's a good start. It's kind of showing us what we're going for a bit. Turn the contrast up and the balance down. It's nice that it's fading in some of the areas that are more affected by the grime. Another thing I want to do though is similar to like these trims. I want to get some different values on these guys, so I'm going to add in a new fill layer. Actually, quickly, we didn't affect the roughness on the top one. Yeah, but anyways, I'm just going to call this color variation. It's just going to be color white with a black mask. And you guessed it, we are going to add a fill with our mask on there. Should be coming through as white. Oh, we have it turned off. Okay, that's probably why. There we go. And we can just sort of add a paint layer to this. Go into our brushes, grab mold, and just kind of go over it really randomly and sporadically and get this kind of pattern on it. Could also use a fill for this, fill layer, but I just kind of like having a bit more control. And then like before, just set it to overlay. And we just get some of this like different values on it. I wonder if it would look better as a dark color. A little bit. Okay. Target some more areas. But anyways, we can go back to the layer itself and affect how much this is getting chipped out. I think lowering the contrast is probably the better bet. And then messing with more of the textures. Getting some good roughness variation. Colors are fading out, rusty corners, chipped paint. That might be a little excessive. I think that's rust stain, yeah. We could probably afford to add a paint layer to this guy and just give it some manual treatment. Paint out some of these bigger scratches. We don't really need them. I like the odd one though. Let's have that 0 poking through. Nice. I love having like a little splash of color, something to just sort of offset the gigantic hunk of metal that this all is. So that's that. Let's go ahead and now do the same treatment on the back. I'm gonna go ahead and save, and then we're just gonna sort of go through all the masks and kind of adjust and more or less repeat what we just did, but on the back. So let's just save and regroup in just a minute. Okay, let's kind of do what we've done this whole time and work our way up. Kind of starting with paint, I think. I think we just need to sort of fill this in a little bit more. We've just lost way too much through the auto-generated mask on the front. So then we'll do a little bit of artistic interpretation and kind of like leave maybe most of the end okay. Kind of like leave the odd spot rusty. But like our text here is pretty much invisible. I kind of like big chunks like that missing, but like I said, if we can't see anything, what's the point? Let's go to these ruler layers here and go to our mask and add a paint layer to it and just sort of bring it back. We'll just do this part manually. So this ruler on the back is a lot more simple and it's a lot more short. So we only really have to focus on the one side. Seems like this is doing quite a bit to it, so I'm going to kind of leave it in splotches, but paint out most of it. This is the darker mask that we added to it. So that's doing a pretty good job of filling it in. Just trying to find the reference of the back of it. It looks pretty much exactly like the front, so let's just sort of work our way up. Paint, rust stains. Just gonna mostly leave those for the corner. And this side, since it's so kind of like bald and deprived of detail, we could probably do a bit more rust on this side just to give it some kind of visual interest. Rust occlusion. It's doing quite a bit back here, so we can add a paint layer to customize it a bit further. Kind of tone down some areas, maybe in the middle. I'm just afraid that it's getting too uniform with some of this, so just stripping some of it away. It has a bit of height information, so that's kind of cool. It's adding some serious wear and tear. Rust stains is also these guys, so I'm going to just tone them down a little bit. This, though, I think is the paint, and I think it's gone back a little bit too far. So I'm just going to pull that back in. I think it's looking pretty healthy back there. We've pretty much matched the tone of the front. So that's going to be the rulers. Of course, we can always come back and adjust these things slightly, but it's more or less how I want them set up. I might actually just go and do a small change to the paint itself and just brighten it a little bit. And maybe give it some kind of color tone. The reference has it the reference has it completely black, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's more accurate. Just lowering that actually. But I wonder if adding a tone could be good. Something warm to really break it free of its surroundings could be cool. So I'm just adding some warm values to it. Looks really good on the front. The contrast is there. Very similar to here. And the back is the same story. Might just brighten it a little bit. Okay, I guess to round off this part, I want to get these guys done, as well as this front. So with the ruler done, let's save, and then we'll dive into those guys. Okay, so how are we going to do this? It kind of seems like this metal is a different metal than this, but it does seem like these back plates and this front plate are pretty similar. It's kind of like this rusty yellow aged type of metal. Not quite sure the best way to describe that, but we do know that these two are going to be the same. So when I remade this, I kind of put everything in the this is still the Metal Misc folder, everything that's in here, but I've just sort of put the ruler in its own group, the ruler group. So let's just continue. We're going to plop something in here to sort of start as a foundation. Let's find our smart materials. See if we have anything that kind of looks like that metal in the reference. Just type in metal. It's kind of like a bare metal. It's not painted or anything. Iron rusted is not quite what we're looking for. Steel ruined. Steel rust surface. I kind of want to say steel rust surface might be a good base, but we're not going to really know until we apply it, right? Let's go take a look. I mean, it's a pretty harmless steel. We can sort of use it as a base. One thing that we do want to do though is first of all rename this to end caps, and we're going to want to add a white mask to this and just like make sure we're not affecting the ruler in any way while we're doing this. So just make sure your mask is on black. Deselect anything from the ruler. And we should be good to work with that. So let's just focus on these guys, and then we can just sort of flip around and do this part at the end. So what are we working with? We have a sharpen layer, rust, edges, metal scratches, and base metal. And this layer on the bottom we can probably get rid of. The base metal is looking very dark. Probably because the roughness is so high, we can turn that down. This looks like a relatively light and shiny metal. It does have a bit of a yellow tint to it too. Not quite gold, but it's aged. I'm also noticing that I think we could probably tighten our color selection a bit. Right here we're getting some white spots. There we go. So let's go back down. End caps, so base metal. Not too much we can really affect here. Maybe a little bit rougher in yellow, that's about it. Metal scratches, we're getting some roughness information, which is nice. But let's see what this mask is actually looking like. Just some kind of cloudy roughness, which I think is okay. It's actually making it shinier rather than rougher though. So I'm just going to adjust that, and then maybe make this a little bit grimier. Turn the balance up, contrast down. Kind of like a good starting position for a metal. edges. See if we want any kind of edge damage. It's kind of messing with our normal a little bit. So if we do this, I think I might want to maybe turn the height to the positive side. It looks a little bit better. It just gives it a little bit more of a crinkled damage look. So I don't mind that. Rust, this is an important part. Let's see what we have to work with here. We might just want to make our own rust, but you never know, it might be decent. Yeah, this rust is definitely not doing it for us. We kind of want something that's more granulated like this, so we might go ahead and steal from the ruler layer. There's definitely some good rust in here. Sorry, not ruler trim. We're looking for like the painted backs. So where painted? I think this was it. Rust stain. Let's start with rust occlusion. We can copy this guy and go back down to metal misc, end caps, edges, and paste it in here. See if we can get anything good out of this. Not really seeing any real difference. Not quite sure what's going on. I mean, we're getting height information, but we're not quite getting anything else. Not quite sure what's going on. So let's opt to try a different one. Maybe just this rust. I think this is the background rust on top of the metal. Okay, this is a step in the right direction. It's pretty aggressive. We're trying to get something very light and thin, so I'm going to actually brighten it quite a bit, lower the saturation, and it seems like it's almost a bit more yellow in the reference. I think just the type of metal rusts in this way. I'm gonna put the sharpen layer above it. We kind of messed that up a little bit. Drip intensity, drip smoothness. Okay, I'm kind of liking this, how it's kind of affecting it all. It's a bit more like the reference, and then we'll just have to paint it a little bit to pull it back in. Cavities. Just makes it more speckles. Height position. We don't really want it messing with the height range though. I might turn down. And yeah, let's go ahead and add a paint layer to this and just kind of mimic what's going on here. Seems like around the bolt there isn't too much. Kind of similar to this. It's really affecting the roughness though. Let's go ahead and check out roughness, maybe just lower the opacity on it. Yeah, I think it's just a bit too much. And I guess typically whenever we switch from like base color to roughness or something, it takes a second to load, so let's just let it do its thing. And crash. Okay. Just give me a second and I'll get us back to where we were. Okay, so we're back, and I think what we're going to do actually this time is use a steel painted worn. So this is what we used for the rulers, but I think it gives us, like, if we get rid of the paint part, it gives us a better foundation for kind of what we're going for here. So let's just sort of start this over and give this one a shot and see if we can get something good out of this, and hopefully no more crashes. This has been a very long recording process. We're getting dangerously close to the end, and the crashes are just sort of piling up now. So let's just power through this, and we'll be done before you know it. So slap this guy on once again. Gotta mask out the ruler areas because we don't want any of the height information sort of traveling through, since we have this essentially in the same group. Let's go ahead and just mask these out. Mask it out here. Same on this end. And on this end. Okay, we can start to focus in on what we have to work with here. This is also definitely lower UV res than this, since I had text here. I think I blew it up a bit. But it's okay. This is definitely not like a main focus area or anything. So let's just build this up again. And right, we have to turn up the tolerance a little bit. Right, okay. Back down we go to the metal. This is actually a really solid metal for this. All I'm gonna change really is brighten it. And maybe turn the roughness value up to begin with. This is probably a bit of a better base. Then add some occlusion dirt. This whole setup is really nice. I think I'm going to continue using this in the future for other things. But dirt contrast, dirt levels. It's just a little too dark. So let's brighten it and give it a bit of a tone. Nothing too crazy, but it's not bad. And I'm just going to reel it in a little bit because from a distance it's still very, very obvious. Maybe I just need to turn the contrast down. Okay, I can work with that. It's a pretty good setup so far. Then we get rust. So this is going to be one of the big components here. Let's lower the saturation on this, turn up the brightness, and make it a tad more yellow. That's kind of what I'm getting from the reference. And then I'm just going to completely redo this mask here. Let's go to our smart masks and swap this out for more of a like surface worn look. Because it kind of seems to be like all over this stuff. Unless we have like a rust surface. Yeah, this is probably exactly what we're looking for. Turn up the balance on this. I mean, it's close. I'm going to turn down the contrast. I feel like it's inverted for some reason. So I think this is more what we're going for. It's just very noisy and very harsh. I wonder if it's because we have... Yeah, the sharpen isn't really helping it. I think we could probably turn that down. It's better. 0.03. Yeah. Right, we're affecting this layer. Curvature. I'm going to turn down AO. And I guess that's kind of like a good foundation where we can now sort of paint manually on it. Just sort of paint out some areas, have it hug the edges. But I might also just want to adjust the colors a bit. I feel like we can make it brighter. And more yellow. But yeah, let's go ahead and add paint. Go get our brush that we're always using. Mold and turn it down, not completely black, but enough where we can start. Getting rid of some of this stuff. Keep it to the edges mostly, and then we can maybe gradually bring some back in. Get this to chill out a little. I don't mind these areas being a bit more actually. But I am worried about this angle. This is going to be one of our main shots when we render, so I really want this to look ideal. But I think that's a pretty good amount of rust. I'm liking the colors, I'm liking the color variation. Got to give this side the same treatment, obviously. It's been hit pretty hard. Just kind of giving it a light dusting. And once again, the metal's kind of like, well, I guess it's yellowy, but it's almost like a cool tone, like silvery comes across as cool. And we're adding warm as kind of a contrast to that, which is always a nice sort of mix up. So we can always go back in and add some more now. Maybe one side is a little more rusty. It's a good looking rust. All things considered, maybe more by the bolt than by the back. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Paint we don't need. Just scrap it unless there's anything in here. It doesn't look like it. We can move up to rust stained. It's giving us some more of these bigger bumps that we've been seeing on the rest of our materials. This is one of those times where I feel like it might be a bit more welcome. Kind of like having that. Let's check it from all the different angles. Yeah, like I'm cool with that. This is a little too much though. And since I don't want to mess up the other side, I'm just going to add a paint. And we can just get rid of this. Leaving a few little nooks and crannies in there. Rust occlusion. This will be an interesting one. It's got some gnarly height information with it. Maybe if we just kill the height altogether. Just check it off. I don't mind getting some more occlusion information in here. Just something to darken it up and add some color variety. It's minuscule, but we might as well include it. Okay. And the sharpen, and that's that. Those guys seem to be good. This front piece though definitely needs a lot of love. So let's go through these masks and sort of give it the right treatment. So this rust is going a little crazy on this guy. We are definitely going to need to scale that way back. So painting that out, painting it off this kind of like beak nose piece. And we'll just do some manual painting for this. It seems like it probably is under here as well. But let's turn these guys off and just sort of work up. The dust is fine. Like I'm cool with that. But let's work on some of these rusty areas. Kind of like continuing this sort of like around the bolts area kind of look. So just have my value a little bit lower. Any sort of edge that it could naturally occur on. It's good to get some roughness variation and height variation. Like that on its own almost seems fine, but we have quite a few more layers like this. I'm going to turn way down. It's good height variation though, but it's just a bit much. And then this is, well, just a little bit crazy. So, tone that down. It makes sense that rust would accumulate on the bottom, but that's a little bit too much. And yeah, like I'm pretty cool with how this is looking. I'm noticing in the reference that the metal is quite a bit more yellow. So I'm actually going to add in a fill layer above the metal. It's just going to be sort of like our color layer. We can just set this to color. And kind of mess with it a little bit. Very yellowish look. Kind of feel like we should lower the roughness as well to get some more variation. Should probably turn this layer back on if I'm going to be messing with it. Okay, not too shabby. It does just seem like these parts that were very bumpy. I kind of might want to just add like a basic noise height filter to get this. as well as like some color to it and roughness. So I'm just gonna call this color. That's a weird way of spelling color. And then we can make a layer above that and call it bump variation. Base color, don't need metallic. We need roughness and height. So we can then add a black mask, add a fill to it, and noise. Gonna go for the blue noise since we've kind of discovered that to be the better one. And let's go ahead and kind of mess with this a little bit. We don't want to do anything too intense like this, but have a subtle height difference and make it black so it's a bit easier to notice what we're doing. Let's go back to this guy. Something along these lines to get this kind of bumpiness, but then I'm also going to add a warp to it. So right click, filter warp. We're getting some more random shapes in here, and then can lower the opacity. I still think these are a little big. So let's try tiling 1.5. And we're kind of pushing it. We can't really get the granulated look we want because of our resolution. There's just not enough pixels to sort of show what we're trying to do. So let's just lower the height a bit. And we're kind of getting that effect from a distance, right? Over here as well. I just hope maybe, yeah, we totally lose it when we raise it a little bit more. Yeah, it really seems like 1 is our sweet spot. We can turn the contrast up, which will make it a little bit sharper. And then lower the height. And I think that's about as good as we're going to get as far as that bumpy pattern goes. And it seems to almost be like a dark green. So I'm just going to try and match that as best as I can. Turn the roughness way up on it. Oh, that's going to make a big difference. Interesting. Then maybe tone it down a bit. Yeah, the roughness is making a pretty solid difference on that, but that is kind of matching exactly the look we're going for. Maybe if we add a little bit more yellow saturation to it. I think that's pretty spot on. This could probably use a little bit more work though. I think these guys are a little unnecessary. It's just getting a little too muddy and noisy. Same with the rust, could probably be toned down a little bit. Some areas that are a little bit more metallic, or else we're going to lose exactly what the actual main material is, right? And then it doesn't really have that contrast that makes it really pop. So just toning that back. And this area I think was toned back more to begin with, but we could probably do it a bit more. Whoa, that's a very rusty area. Is this the occlusion? Yeah. Way too much. Way too much. I think I'm happy with that. I do, just now that this is in front of me, want to get rid of the scratch, so let's go back up all the way up to metal frame, find our scratches. I can't even remember if this is the right layer. And let's kind of get that guy out of here. Yeah, it was just a bit too big, right? But I think that'll do it for this part. We got quite a bit done. We added in the rulers. The front plates are looking really nice. Like, they're really matching that texture right there. So we're in a good position to move on to the next part. In the next section, we're going to be finishing up this and then doing our sort of blending on all these upper parts. And then we should be done the frame. I suppose we forgot this little yellow thing, but we can do that at the very start of the next part. Shouldn't take any time at all. But for now, I think we're going to call it. I think this is a pretty natural place to end it. So thank you guys for watching this part. Hopefully you learned something. And yeah, I'm really proud of how this is coming along, and hopefully you guys are learning quite a bit from this texturing process too. So let's wrap this guy up in the next part, get to our third and final texture set, and then we're rendering, and this whole thing's done. So before you know it, we'll finish up, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So we'll catch you guys in the next part. See ya.